Bring in show music, please.
This is Squawk Pod. I'm CNBC producer Zach Vallese. On today's podcast, noted short seller Andrew left. His activist reputation hinges on exposing corporate fraud or vulnerability and betting on the stock of a target company declining.
Everyone has to trade with their own risk tolerance. I can't tell you how to trade. I wish I had Warren Buffett's patience.
Now, for the first time, he is responding to federal charges that his outspokenness misled investors about his intentions.
The stock's 140, and I said, I think the stock's going to trade at 160. What part of that's unrealistic? And I sell it in the 150s. How is this a civil charge? How is that a criminal charge?
Plus, the rest of today's news. Steve Leisman on the surprisingly strong jobs numbers spooking rate cut ready investors.
The Fed had pushed aside this notion that employment was a potential source of inflation. These kind of numbers kind of bring it back.
The tech leaders writing checks for the Trump inauguration. And Panama, is your canal for sale?
Make them an offer they can't refuse.
All that and more today. It's Friday, January 10th, 2025. Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Becky by in 3, 2, 1. Cue it, please.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We are live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Becky Quick along with Joe Kernen and Andrew Ross Sorkin, and it is a Jobs Friday, and we are awaiting that number just 2.5 hours.
First up today on the podcast, a massive jobs report. The U.S. economy created 256,000 jobs in the month of December, far above the expected number. And the unemployment rate ticked down a bit to 4.1%.
Non-farm payrolls for the month of December on our jobs report. Way hot, 256,000. What a shocker.
This brings to a close the full jobs picture of 2024, where employment grew each month, though there were some ups and downs. But is the job market too strong for the Federal Reserve to continue cutting interest rates? Joe Kernen asked that very question today of our chief economics correspondent, Steve Leisman.
I really was hoping for a really crappy number. And it's not so much that I think that would mean more cuts or a likelihood of more cuts. I just think it would start to make you think that we don't have to worry about inflation so much. But when things like this are happening, inflation, which is already, and I'm not talking about tariffs necessarily, and I'm not talking about immigration necessarily, but add those in. But just where we are, just from what's remaining from what the Fed was trying to do in the first place. We weren't there yet when they started cutting. And it doesn't seem like we're there, and this doesn't seem like, and the markets do not like this. And there goes the 10-year and the 30-year. Why am I wrong?
Well, it's like you come home and your daughter kisses you and you say, I'm afraid you're not going to love me in the future. I mean, right now, Joe, you got really good jobs numbers.
You're just arguing. You're arguing with the markets.
I'm not. I'm just saying.
Why is it happening then?
I'm just saying.
Just talk about what is not.
First, you're right. You're right in the sense that the Fed had pushed aside this notion that employment was a potential source of inflation. These kind of numbers kind of bring it back in the sense that the payroll numbers themselves are hot. Unemployment rate has been, dancing around this 4.1, 4.2 number. But I don't want to awfulize this number, Joe. I just think it's the wrong way.
You don't have to.
I mean, the market can awfulize it all
What
at
is
once.
the market saying?
I don't think it's right to awfulize it, okay? I am going to argue with the market.
No cuts?
I'm going to put my hand down.
No cuts?
I think it's no cuts. I think that's right. But we're putting a lot of people to work. We reduce the number of long-term unemployed. We have a little room left to go
always like
on
jobs.
Participation.
There's always that argument.
Wages were not that
we're talking
hot.
about markets. There's always the argument that we do want people working. We want people getting.
I don't let Wall
increase.
Street tell me what the right
Sometimes
number of employment
Depends
is.
on what the number. Let's get to.
It is a cynical perspective.
It is,
from Wall Street.
but it's just we are
good. People have jobs.
What we face.
Now to the wildfires around Los Angeles. Let's talk about what's going on. They continue to spread. Yesterday, 10 people now have died, and evacuation orders have expanded to a total of 180,000 people. A new brush fire appearing in the Woodland Hills area of LA yesterday. That prompted a new round of mandatory evacuation orders. And yesterday, President Biden saying the federal government would cover 100% of the cost of recovery for the first 180 days. It would pay for first responders' salaries, debris and hazardous material removal, and temporary shelters. JP Morgan estimating that insured losses from this week's fires may exceed $20 billion, which would make it the costliest blaze, that $20 billion number, a lot lower than a couple of others. And obviously, that's the insured losses we're talking about. There are now estimates that we're talking 60, 70 plus billion dollars.
Nothing's insured, unfortunately. They all left. They continue to leave. Yeah.
The Supreme Court denying President-elect Trump's emergency bid to halt his criminal sentencing in New York today. That sentencing is scheduled for this morning. Trump was convicted on 34 felony counts of falsifying records to cover up a sex scandal. The judge has indicated that he will impose what he called an unconditional discharge, which is a lenient alternative to jail or probation. Trump plans to attend the hearing virtually. He had argued that being sentenced 10 days before his inauguration would distract from the presidential transition. A 5-justice majority in the Supreme Court found that the burden, in their words, is relatively insubstantial and noted that Trump could still challenge his conviction in the ordinary course on appeal. Incoming President Trump also talking about saying that he respected the court's opinion on that and would listen to it.
Right. Some people said now he can appeal it. He had to wait for this until he could appeal, so hearing both sides of it. But he's already, this allows critics to call him the first felon that was convicted and sentenced, but people are already calling him that. I don't know if it really matters at this point. They've been calling him that for...
Look, it's important from the broader issue of the Supreme Court and the decision that they made. Would that
interesting
broad
who
protections
was,
of the president...
I asked my son. It was Robert...
Before.
Yeah, Roberts and Barrett.
Mm-hmm. Amy Coney Barrett.
Amy ACB, yeah. We're both in the majority.
Yeah.
Meantime, CNBC is now confirming a report that the Senate Finance Committee plan to hold a confirmation hearing on January 16th for President-elect Trump's pick for Treasury Secretary. That is Scott Bessent, of course. The committee hearing would set up an executive session in which lawmakers could advance his nomination to a confirmation vote by the full Senate shortly after Trump takes office. So one of the sort of first chess pieces of the administration getting put in place there. Meantime, Pennsylvania Democratic Senator John Fetterman saying he plans to meet with President-elect Trump at Mar-a-Lago. He told NBC he doesn't have a specific message to deliver to Trump and doesn't know what message Trump plans to convey to him, but said there are several issues, including China, Israel, and the border on which they can work together. Fetterman also said he plans to support some of Trump's cabinet nominees, and he's open to hearing from all of them. So some shifting winds.
He's been shifting for a while.
He's been shifting for a while.
He has, and he's, a lot of his sound bites from different cable networks where he says things like, if someone is here illegally and is committing crimes, who would not want that person to? So he's said what seemed like kind of not crazy things, but people embrace that. Some news on the transition from the Mag 7 to the MAGA 7, or there may be more than 7. At this point, more major companies are donating to President Trump's inauguration fund. Here we go. Microsoft, Alphabet's Google, now Adobe, each donating $1 million. This doesn't necessarily, I'm kidding, this is a long tradition that companies support the inauguration of the U.S. president.
Not always.
But we were joking a little bit. They don't always, but we were joking that
does Mag
7 become MAGA 7?
Well, among the tech companies, they've generally stayed out of the law.
Certainly not for
Trump. They've gotten a little more involved.
Right, and certainly stayed out of it.
But they weren't. No, but the point is, they weren't doing inaugurations for Biden. They weren't doing inaugurations for Obama. They
liked being on the West Coast and away from D.C.
Right, they were not part of this. So,
well, they better be now. Tech giants, including Amazon and Meta, and notable CEOs, including Tim Cook and Sam Altman.
Republican Congressman Dusty Johnson has introduced a bill that would authorize the purchase of the Panama Canal. We've been having lots of conversations about what's going on between Panama and Greenland and Canada. This may be the first one on the list. The South Dakota lawmaker said China's interest and presence around the canal is a cause for concern and backed President Trump's call to consider repurchasing it. The bill would authorize the President and Secretary of State to initiate and conduct negotiations with Panama. We're going to talk a lot more about President-elect Trump's expansion proposals throughout the day on CNBC. Hard to know, though. This would just give permission effectively to go negotiate. It's not necessarily an amount. It's not a bag of money saying go.
Going to make them an offer they can't refuse. Going to make them an offer they can't. You've seen that.
I mean, the more you hear about these issues, the more you kind of understand, particularly with Greenland. I was not familiar with that issue before.
To buy. I want to buy Greenland. I do. And you know, there's
53,000 people who live there.
53,000 times a million is like what we gave Ukraine last month.
The issues are when you hear other countries like Russia wanting to get involved with maybe playing a larger role there. This is a changing risk board.
Right, and I thought about it, but you know, it's a noble endeavor to try to stop Putin, and there's a domino theory, and there's a lot of concerns about Poland and what's next. I understand all that, so it's hard. You can't really compare the two things for good. But then again, given the future, between the three major superpowers, and Russia's not a superpower, but China certainly is, and the United States is, and with what's at stake. It's not totally insane for U.S. security in this point to think about Greenland. Do you not want to buy it for sure? You think?
Well, the difference is negotiating or just taking it.
Well, I think that's the issue. Right. And when you do this,
that was Marlon Brando.
I know, but that's my point. Anytime there's any form of intimidation to get something. Mm-hmm. If it's just a negotiation, I'm buying
economic?
this,
or let us help you out,
and let us help you out.
Because we're already helping you from a securities
perspective. But I think that the second we get into my view is the second we get into a thing where there's some form of economic intimidation, coercion, or anything else.
So you would
to do that.
You would take economic coercion off the table.
I might, because I think all of a sudden it changes the dynamic for every other country in the world.
Well, and
they already do it.
It raises
Not
the
like
questions
that.
of whether this will be
Worse.
long-term or whether you'll wind up in a situation like Jimmy Carter where they said, yeah, we have to hand it over because otherwise we're going to have to send troops there to do it. If you are doing this in a sense of partnership, it seems like a more long-lasting partnership could continue.
I just don't want to be naive about the way the world works.
I don't either, but I think that goodwill can go a long way with these things, and I'd rather do it on a business partnership where they say, yeah, we would rather have you than Putin here, or we would rather have you than China.
We should set an example. There's no doubt as the shining city on a hill, but we shouldn't be patsies either.
I agree.
But I don't think we're being patsies with Greenland.
There's many times where we are in terms of trade and everything else where we're taking advantage of. That's why 7 swing states in popular vote in the House all went one direction. I think there's just a general feeling that, America first, and we haven't always put ourselves first. We're protecting the rest of the world. We provide security for the rest of the world, and for a while, NATO, a lot of the people weren't paying.
But now we're mixing issues. I agree with you on NATO.
Well, this is all part of America first, though, Andrew, and it's part of taking care of our own security.
I would like to. So
they have an advantage going to the Arctic. How about all the great
would it be great for
rare earth elements?
Would it be great? I'm not saying we shouldn't own. I'm not saying it's not a terrible idea to make some kind of deal if you could. I'm just saying the question is how you're making those deals, because how you make that deal is how everything else is going to happen in the future.
It just seems like it should be a deal that helps both sides.
So you remember in Panama. It's not going to. It probably wouldn't. You've heard what they're saying, that over my dead body, things like that. So it's not going to. People aren't just going to be smiling at each other while this happens. You may need to play some hardball. So that's where I think the economic. If it's coercion, if it's purely economic, it doesn't seem like it's that untoward and against our principles.
Is it a stick or is it a carrot? Right.
Right.
Tease will be next.
Coming up, activist short seller Andrew Left made his reputation on Wall Street for being an outspoken investor. He's taken stances against Valiant Pharmaceuticals and Shopify. Now he's in the hot seat. Left will speak out for the very first time on the criminal and civil fraud charges filed against him by the DOJ and SEC. That's ahead of his trial scheduled for September.
A lot of lawyers tell their clients when there's a criminal trial in civil cases like this not to speak out.
I trust my legal team. I trust the judges. I trust the system.
This exclusive interview with our Andrew Ross Sorkin is next. Welcome back to Squawk Pod. This next interview brings into focus a common practice on Wall Street: short selling. Activist short sellers, like the one you'll hear from next, publish public critical reports on specific companies, highlighting overvaluation or exuberance. They then bet on the stock's trajectory. Activist short sellers often consider themselves doing the markets and other investors a service, uncovering fraud, for example. CNBC features them often. Famous names you may recognize: Carson Block, David Einhorn, Bill Ackman, and our next guest, Andrew Left. The dirt digging and public critiques aren't at issue. In the Department of Justice and SEC, cases filed against Andrew Left, it's the question of manipulation, that if an activist short seller publicly announces a position, but then takes another one, is it wrong? The cases in some way get to how clout on social media, namely X, affects the markets. Here's Andrew Ross Sorkin.
Activist short seller Andrew Left was charged last summer with multiple counts of fraud. In July, authorities accused Left of manipulating the market and defrauding investors by making misleading statements about his positions in well-known stocks, including Nvidia, Tesla, and Facebook. The SEC and the Department of Justice focused on how Left publicly described his positions versus how he actually traded those stocks. And joining me right now in an exclusive interview where he's speaking out publicly for the very first time since those allegations is Andrew Left. He's the founder of Citron Research. A lot of folks on Wall Street, in the investment community, hedge funds, and short sellers have been watching this case. And so I appreciate you very, very much
nice
joining
being
us.
here, Andrew.
Let me just start with this. A lot of lawyers tell their clients when there's a criminal trial and civil case like this not to speak out before a case begins. Why are you willing to even do that?
It's funny. My lawyer, obviously, I asked him, I said, should I be doing this? And he said, normally I would say no, Andrew, but I know how you believe in your case and how we believe in it, so go ahead and do it. The reason for me, most importantly, is obviously he's activist short seller Andrew Left. I'm also I'm a father. I'm like a member of the community. And my name, I spent 20 some odd years building a name on Wall Street just to have it besmirched by this. I wanted to come on and speak my piece.
Okay, so before we speak your piece, I just want to know about the moment on a personal level, the moment that you were charged. Did you know it was coming? What did it feel like? And how do you feel now?
Okay, so the moment I was charged, what's crazier is the moment the search warrant was issued was a day after the whole GameStop saga. So you can imagine that was a wonderful week of my life. And the 4 years...
Sarcastically, because that was not a wonderful week of your life.
Oh, no, of course. So the 3.5, 4 years going from there on in, you're saying, what am I being investigated for? Like, what's this about? So when the actual indictment came down, there was a sense of, oh my God, I'm being indicted. And then I read it and a sense of relief saying, Tesla, Nvidia, Facebook, wait, I shorted these stocks? And then, okay, if the government goes through tens of thousands of your emails and messages, you don't know what's going to be found. So when I read it, there was a sense of relief.
Okay, well, let's talk about whether you should have that relief or not, because this is what the SEC said. We uncovered what they're calling alleged bait and switch tactics, which netted Left and his firm $20 million in what they're calling ill-gotten profits, and we intend to hold Left and his firm accountable for their actions. What they're effectively suggesting is that you put oftentimes on Twitter what you plan to do or what you were doing, and then after you tweeted about those things, the allegation is that you either sold out of those positions or did the opposite to some degree of what you were telling the public.
I've never done the opposite. So the opposite, in my opinion, would be if I told you to buy and I turned around and shorted the stock. Okay. It was risk management. Anyone who trades stocks for a living know if you have a position on, you might trim it, you might put stop loss orders in, you might put limit orders if you're making money. Most importantly, they use the word immediately. I traded immediately. But in some of these cases, immediately was 1 day. In some of these cases, immediately is 6 days, 4 days. For stocks that trade 50 million shares a day. So it seems very open, this word immediate.
Well, in some cases, though, it does appear that it was within a day. In some cases, within an hour. No?
Of course. General Electric, years ago when Harry Markopoulos was on CNBC and called GE a complete fraud, I then turned around and I wrote a quick write-up why GE is not a fraud. It's up 300% since then. Stanley Druckenmiller came on CNBC, defended it. And sure enough, I put it out, and luckily within that day, the market also already realized it was wrong, the Markopoulos report, and I sold my stock. It was maybe an hour later. It was.
Right. How much do you think this is about not just saying I'm long something, but I'm long something and I have a particular price target on a stock? So I'm thinking about in the NVIDIA example, for example, which was then trading at $144. You say we see 165 before we see 120. The Department of Justice says then you sold the position at a price of 150.
Think of how crazy that's a criminal charge. I said the words unrealistic price targets. By the way, since that, NVIDIA's up, I think, 3,500%. The stock's 140, and I said, I think the stock's going to trade at 160. What part of that's unrealistic? And I sell it in the 150s. How is this a civil charge? How is that a criminal charge? And actually, the whole context of the tweet was I said, NVIDIA, this is 2019, the leader in AI.
Right.
I'm discussing it before ChatGPT. So where's the investor protection?
One of the examples that they use is that of Tesla. And I want to raise the issue of Tesla with you because there's an interesting irony to all this, which was that you sued Tesla over the time when Elon Musk talked about taking the company private at $420, meaning he had put out a target on it. It ultimately obviously wasn't something that happened. And how you think about that relative to your own situation?
I didn't sue him. I was part of a case that I actually dropped out of that suit in the class action because at the time I was short Tesla. I was the first Tesla critic to change tune on it, and I took a lot of heat from it. Actually, I was fortunate enough to do it at the most pivotal moment of Tesla's history, which was Q3 18. 2 days before they reported, I put out a wonderful 21-page report explaining why I was wrong on Tesla, why Tesla is a buy.
Right.
Tesla pre-released earnings, stock went higher, I made money, I sold my Tesla stock, and that's the largest. The Tesla is the largest financial of all the charges. That's the largest one. Me telling people to buy Tesla in 2018.
So I think there's a larger, almost philosophical, there's a legal question and a philosophical question about what you think the investor class should or should not be able to say publicly and aloud, and what they should be disclosing about when they either change their mind or change their position.
That's a good question. So as long as, in my opinion, I've never been accused by the SEC or DOJ of ever lying about a company. That's the key thing. I speak the truth about companies. My opinions are truthful. As for trading, everyone has to trade with their own risk tolerance. I can't tell you how to trade. I wish I had Warren Buffett's patience. Someone else's trading acumen.
Right.
So can you imagine if this is true? Any guest on CNBC has to come on with their lawyer in the background, because I'm sure people are going to be discussing NVIDIA 100 times today on TV. And if they change their opinion in the next 2 days and they sell it, are they committing a criminal act?
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you how you think about the folks like a Roaring Kitty, for example, and you think about his circumstances, meaning he seems to be able to move stocks materially, and at some point I think he's getting in or out of them when he puts up a meme, and your circumstance.
Forget about Roaring Kitty. How about the millions of people a day who are on Twitter, who are on Reddit? How about the hundreds of guests you have on CNBC? And they have to update their trading positions with their statements. If you trade
this is
within
the
how
very
many
interesting
days?
issue about sort of the First Amendment, right, on one end, which is your ability to actually go out and express an opinion, and the question of the distinction between expressing an opinion and the idea of manipulation, right?
Fair enough.
How do you think about that?
Well, if your opinion is based on fact, an example, on the activist short campaigns that they discuss, all the 4 activist short campaigns are down 90%. Most are down 99%. 3 of the 4 turned out to be complete frauds. Okay. So I put out that information. Is that my opinion, or is it the fact that moves the market? That's the important thing. They don't accuse me ever of lying about companies. So it's not my opinion. If you put out fact, and fact moves the market, that's not manipulation.
Okay. What about sharing such information or opinions that you plan to share publicly with others and other hedge funds, and if you will, prior to doing it, so that they can get in on the action, if you will, in advance? Right. I mean, that's part of this as well.
It's not one of the charges or counts in there or background information is that I collaborate with hedge funds.
Correct, and that's what I'm referring to.
And I think it's well known that many activist short sellers do collaborate with hedge funds. If you want to get good information out there, it takes a collaborative effort. You won an Emmy 2 years ago. Did you not have a producer or a writer on there? And you collaborated, but you won the Emmy. So I put out a report. Did I have people help me with research on it? Of course.
But I guess the question is, if they know that you're planning to put out a report at 8 o'clock in the morning, and that they then plan to trade on that, if they could, at 8:02 in the morning, is that a form of manipulation? Is that a form of insider information, even though it's not? I mean, you don't represent an insider. This is the very interesting sort of.
I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to opine on that. That's not one of the charges
per se.
That's not one of the charges. If someone does that, the market's a caveat emptor. I mean, look, if you did that with GameStop, you would have lost money. So, the market has a mind of its own.
Right.
There's no secret button anyone
has. One of the
has.
charges, though, does relate to this idea that you have a research firm on one end and a hedge fund on another, and that there's been misrepresentation of what all of that is.
I mean, I don't see, again, that's not one of the charges. They're just background information to put in there to kind of soil, but I don't even know how, my reputation. I ran a hedge fund. I was the investor of my hedge fund. Everything's disclosed. I have disclaimers, the same disclaimers that every other activist, short seller, newsletter writer, many disclaimers that are still on CNBC. What's the there? Is the information I put out to the market true? Yes. Have they ever said I put out information that's not true? No. Let the market decide on it.
When you think about what this case is about, do you think there's something else going on here? I mean, do you think there's an effort to chill the short selling universe? I know there's a lot of short sellers out there that are watching this case super carefully.
Of course. It shouldn't just be short sellers. It should be everyone. Like I said, every single guest on CNBC has to watch this. I think what's behind this is initially, short sellers have been a thing of Hollywood folklore. Look what the short seller is going to do. And I think there was a mandate to somehow investigate short sellers. I was the one they went to. They went through everything to see, was there insider trading? Was there some form of collusion? Was there, naked short selling? Any of these things, people, did I try to plant something in a company? Nothing.
What do you think about using, you talked about coming on our air, for example, or talking to a newspaper reporter or taking to Twitter. How has social media, do you think, changed this? And do you think there should be different rules?
I mean, social media has really leveled the playing field of information in the stock market, because now people see short interest. People even know how to deal with short reports, what's valid and not valid. It's become, it's such a complex, adaptive system, the stock market.
Right.
And social media is definitely a part of it, but so is analysis, so is television. It just all goes into the salad. And at the end, we just get price discovery.
Well, one of the things, though, that the SEC has talked about is creating some kind of restrictions in terms of days with which if you're going to announce something and then be able to get out of it. How would that change the business for you?
I mean, that's foolish. It's a crazy thought that you can, if you publish an opinion, you can't trade it for 5 days. Does that include investment banks? What if the stock goes? So in GameStop, I couldn't cover for 5 days. It just doesn't make sense. For anyone who trades stocks, understands the fact that that doesn't make sense.
We do have a new president coming into office in the next couple of days. I'm curious if you think that could actually change the outcome of your case. Do you think that this administration is going to continue to pursue the case, both on the criminal side of it and on the civil side of it? And do you think that the SEC is going to think about these issues differently?
I mean, the case is out there, so it's already been filed. With the new administration comes new people with the DOJ and the SEC. I don't look at my case as being a partisan case, but I think the new administration does put a new set of perspectives, priorities within the government.
Right.
And with that, I just want fresh eyes that look at it fair and objectively and look at this case for what it is and say, oh, there's no there.
Right.
That's what I'm looking forward to.
But I imagine your hope, just even by talking about this here, is that you're hoping that there are fresh eyes that look at this case and look at it differently, no?
I mean, of course. Like I said, I'm not looking for this being a partisan issue like, oh, now this new administration favors this type of behavior. This type of behavior is fine in any administration. Right. I'm putting honest information in the marketplace.
Before I let you go, just on a very personal level, how scared are you? And I ask that, I ask that because you have a great confidence to you, and we've talked for many years, and you've been on the air talking about all sorts of things over the years. But, if you were to lose this case, this could include prison.
Of course. You ready? I trust the system. I really do. And it's unfortunate what I'm dealing with. And I trust my legal team. I trust the judges. I trust the system that in the long run, I'm very fortunate that I have the resources to deal with this. But I think in the long run, I trust our system, and I think it's going to work.
Andrew Leff, thank you for coming on this morning. Appreciate it very, very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we look forward to following the progress of the case.
That's the pod for today and for the week. Happy Friday. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernen, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Tune in weekday mornings on CNBC at 6 Eastern. And follow Squawk Pod to get the best of our show. Interviews like today's exclusive with Andrew Leff, analysis from our gang on the incoming Trump administration. Get it all right into your ears in an easy-to-listen-to daily podcast. Hit that follow button wherever you're listening right now. We'll meet you back here on Monday. Have a great weekend.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.